Hello, everyone. Okay, well, this is a unique situation here where I'm for the first time really conducting what I've called an open forum. I thought a lot about over the course of the summer, knowing the need to communicate to the town and to the community really in a more aggressive way, perhaps in terms of reaching out and connecting with people. So this is kind of what I've conceived of as a series of open forums. I have the first 3 scheduled. We could do more. We could do different times of the week. I could do on a Saturday morning or something. I'm just the idea is to give the opportunity for people to have to provide me some input, some thinking around the major topics, input around now fulfilling the term, or not fulfilling the terms, but making appointments to the warrant committee, and then the responsibility of making the appointments to the school building committee. And then these other dialogues that I've been talking about around, one of them around volunteerism, in town, and continue to promote that and to try to ignite some activity, not just about the appointments that I need to make, but about other opportunities. And I'll speak to that a little bit at the end. And then finally, a topic that's kind of been on my mind, been in play over the last couple of years, been editorialized in the Boston Globe, but how do we look at open town meeting in the 21st century? I know you and I, Bob, have corresponded around opportunities for doing that. We looked at electronic voting one time, and I think it's time to kind of get that, kind of back up on the table and look at it. The notion of remote meetings, that works in city councils, it works in representative town meetings. They're able to do it in representative town meetings, but so far it's not available as a resource to open town meetings, and I'm not sure what that would mean for it anyway. So we'll have that conversation. So let me get started just by we go to the slides, and I'll go through them very quickly. The first one was the letter that I wrote. Just speaks to what I've already mentioned, which was the idea here is that.
Yeah, hold on, give me 1 second. It has signed me out. So hold on. 1 second. Let's see.
You're still in.
I'm in.
Just
it's just not. Yeah, it's just not letting me.
Right. This is what's being seen at home too, what we see up on the screen. So, this is the first of the open letters, and I'm open to any kind of a commentary about how to kind of craft this message in a way that does connect with the community, and also other ways, just approaches to be able to get the word out. So this was the first of the letters. I expect to do this kind of on a regular basis. Christine, if we switch to the next slide, this was the kind of the challenge that prompted the conversation, was a recognition that it's over the years, as I have reach out to warrant committee people for appointments for opportunity, it's been challenging to get people to come forward. And so although this time around, I have a little bit more of maybe a demographic bent than I've had in the past, only because of the 2 members who have left, who were great. They were young working women, mothers, professionals, and brought some balance to the committee. So that has always been one of the objectives of it. So this is an active time. Who is my audience? My audience, I spoke to Marion. She sent me the list of our registered voters. And so we have 9,284, registered voters in town of our population of 1,288, and that is current as of yesterday. And so it's a big pool, and we know that it's an engaged pool just by looking back, as I did on voting records, for instance, in presidential elections. We do phenomenally well in terms of the percentage of turnout, and obviously it goes down for midterm elections, and it has gone down again for local elections, and for a town meeting. We've had extraordinary special town meetings with over 2,000 a year ago in November, and then in June of this year we had great attendance. But we also know that we had an annual town meeting where we didn't get a quorum the first time around. So this is a question for me, is how to mobilize some higher percentage of our voting population to be engaged in the governance where we need people. Although I think that, it remains a very engaged town. If you look across all of the things that people do, that's not a critique. It's just that as it relates to some of the things that we would like to get some people connected into some of the opportunities we have in town government. The next slide is just kind of a statement. I'm not sure whether it projects well, but this is from our town charter and our bylaws, just speaks to the role of the warrant committee. But the key thing for me there is that it's contained in the section on the town meeting being the legislative branch of government. The warrant committee is a very, very important part of that. It has the responsibility relative to the town budget, obviously, and our warrant committee, unlike a finance committee, has the responsibility to opine and make recommendations on all of the articles, not just articles that are directly financial, but on all of the articles. So that's a broad source of authority, and that's a little bit of anybody interested in it that can begin the primer. If you just go to our bylaws and our charter, you get a little sense of the way that the warrant committee fits into the whole framework of how town government works. And if we go one more slide. I take pride in the heritage of this, of this committee, and particularly over the last couple of years, it's been a lot of work by a very dedicated group, very collaborative group of people, who have addressed some very critical issues for the town. And because of the way they've cycled through, the warrant committee has been not in quite in continuous operation. Bob, you might speak to that, but in very, very active in what used to be the off seasons as well. In terms of this time of year into the fall, a little less activity traditionally, but because we had the special town meeting a year ago, and then this year when we came out of our annual town meeting, we were headed right into the special town meeting for the state hospital. So it's been a lot of work. So for me, trying to bring talented and committed and our collaborative neighbors to the committee is an annual thing. This is a listing of since I've been doing it, the people that I've appointed. So it's you would, if you look at that list, you'd recognize a lot of people who have been great leaders for the town of Medfield, who have made tremendous contributions over that period of time. It's a lot of people that I've known in one fashion or another. It's a lot of people who have come forward as volunteers. It's through a process of reaching out to people and asking them about who might be good in this particular kind of a role. Then we've surfaced a whole lot of people, a number of people here who have. We've got 3 or 4 selectmen from the list over that period of time, and a number of people who have really demonstrated leadership for the benefit of the town in so many ways. And it continues, because if we go to the next slide, this is the makeup of the warrant committee as of today. And if you click one more time, Christine, this is my responsibility here is that we have 2 positions. So both Amanda Hall and Christine Barton, they served a full term, and so their term expired at the end of the fiscal year, and each of them decided that they would like to step down. And so that's why I have the 2 openings here that will be appointments that will be full term appointments. And I'll be reappointing Steve Callahan, who was, I think he finished the term. I can't remember, go back in time, and so they will all serve through 2025. And so this is the way that the rotation works. It's 3 folks whose position comes up for election, whose term expires on a every 3-year basis. But traditionally, if you look at all of these people who have served, there's a lot of appointments. When people leave, they, in my view, they serve at their own pleasure and their own leisure. So if somebody wanted to leave after 4 years instead of 6 years, or There have been people who have changed jobs or had other situations that have changed in their life, in which we're very flexible with that. But this is the profile of the the current warrant committee, and the need to bring two more very strong players into the warrant committee, and to try to strike some of the general demographic balance to it. If we look to the next slide, this is again a little bit difficult to read from a distance. I don't know whether it's going to be difficult to read for people online, but over time I've tried to establish a range of criteria for the warrant committee, largely having to do with initially a statement of character integrity, which we always put right at the top. And then the next one is that I look for warrant committee members who don't have a single issue focus. That I have a concept that I've been talking about for 20 years about weaving the fabric of a community. So if you take the schools, and if you take the Department of Public Works, and you take public safety, and you take the downtown, and you take all of the other good things happening with all the volunteer efforts, really, I think it's kind of the job of town government to weave them all together into a fabric that represents the town. And it's for us, it's a very important part of it. So there have been people who have had an interest in being on the warrant committee, who were singularly focused on a particular issue at the exclusion of others. I have no problem with people being that way, but I found over time that they may be better serving as an advocate for that position than to be on an advisory committee that's really a deliberative body. So that's just my own particular bias for that. So I do look for deliberative body team players. We have a warrant committee over the last couple of years that has been full of that. I look for people who are going to contribute to the knowledge or the experience base. So we try to insights of the group. You can read this for yourself. I don't need to read it, but it goes down in terms of judgment. People who are, it's great to find people who have had a demonstrated commitment to Medfield community. That's a great way for me to be able to draw people to the warrant committee. And most of the people that I've appointed over the past 20 years have been involved in the community before they came to the warrant committee. The warrant committee necessarily wasn't the first engagement they had with local governance, and many of the people have been on one committee or another, some not. And so we've made those appointments. And I have, in particular, the second to last one is about the ability to lower one's self-orientation, which is part of the trust equation. I mean, the lower that your self-orientation can be, the better that you, I think, are going to work in a deliberative group. And that's, I think, is in an advisory body. It's really important to see it as kind of a collective experience, as a group. It doesn't mean that individuals don't get a chance to be able to express their opinion. It's just that, it's done in a way respecting the opinion of everyone else. And so that, and then finally, Bob, you can attest to this. It is helpful to have a sense of humor. And I think over the last couple of years that was demonstrated, certainly Sharon's leadership, I think, spoke to that. It was always, there was a very good tone to it over the last couple of years. So I'll respond to that, but that's the first part of it. That's an annual thing that in every year I've had to make, I think, at least one appointment. This is the most that it's ever been has been 4. And in this year we have at least 2 appointments to be made. The school building committee composition, this is just the bylaw, just to kind of level set everybody in terms of what was passed at the annual town meeting. And so the bylaw was composed. We put it to a vote. It passed as required. And if we just kind of hit the next slide, Christine, it kind of frames into my portion of that. So it is under the bylaw that was approved. It is my responsibility to appoint 4 members of the community to the school building committee. One appointment will be a current warrant committee member. That'll be selected by the warrant committee. So in some respects, it's not really an appointment, but I will affirm the selection of the warrant committee to bring somebody to the school building committee. And then the second provision, one appointment will be a senior Medfield resident, 65 years of age or over. This was a little controversial when it came up. Some people favored it, other people didn't favor it. But it made the cut, and this is a provision in terms of what I will be reaching out. It will be somebody to bring that to. I think I joked at the time that I just would have to, make inquiries around my tennis group, and I'd be able to find people who qualified in that fashion. But I'm interested in hearing, as people think about and talk to me about how they think about the folks that should come to the school building committee, how they think about that particular appointment with that requirement. And the other two, I would say, are citizens at large. And so those are the 4 appointments that I have to make. I haven't had a lot of commentary because I really wanted to start listening to this process of open forums at the beginning. I'm just kind of quoting myself here in terms of the open letter that I wrote. So, it really is an honor to be able to do this. It's also a kind of a challenge. My own view is that it's time to move forward in terms of renewing our commitment to elementary education. In fact, I don't think through the whole process the last time there was all that much disagreement about that principle anyway. So we got to come back and I think get centered on the fact that that's the common ground, for most people in town, that, there is a commitment in town to elementary education. And because of my notion of the fabric of community, I've often thought about, okay, we are a great community with great schools. And that should be a kind of a statement, a hallmark statement, I think, of us going forward. So, and I also think this time we need to go forward, having been through the experience that we had been through in 2000 and a year ago, right? So 2021, we need to try to go forward in a civil way, as in an open process, collaborative and very smart and as gauged as we can. So my own hope would be that the appointments that I could make would help to contribute, or maybe even be partially instrumental to the idea of coming together to do this, to renew our commitment to elementary education, and particularly with the process of the building, and then also to move forward. There's always learning, right? I mean, that's the old saying. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, or something. It's something to that effect. And that's there's a lot of learning. Bob and I have sat and had a cup of coffee. I've talked to almost everyone who was a participant in the process, with only a couple of exceptions. And so now we go forward. And so part of that is the appointments that I need to make. And the process, if people are really interested in that's 4 of the 12 appointments, obviously, of the voting members. And I think if we tune into the selectmen's meeting next Tuesday, we'll get further insight into how the school committee is going to move forward relative to that part of the process, and how the selectmen will move forward to that part of the process. I think of the role of the moderator as being interdependent, interrelated. At the end of the day, what's important is that we get the right committee, people that can work together, that bring the right range of expertise, experience, skills. I hope the right mindset about great elementary schools, and that they will come together, and we'll have a committee that will take us forward. So that's what I will try to do. But I wanted to start the process by listening as much as we could. I just happened to run by this today when I was looking at this. Is a piece from exactly 10 years ago this week that Richard DeSorga wrote, but it goes back to the roots of our education roots in Medfield that go back really to the beginning. And you can find throughout the history of Medfield our commitment to education being reinforced in a variety of different years, different periods, so I think that heritage it's important to maintain. It also has a picture there, of course, of the Dale Street School from 90. It looks huge. Well, that's one of the high school, right? So, yeah. So I'm interested in talking to folks, have people correspond and about the appointments to the school building committee, the warrant committee appointments. I'm ready to move forward with, although I think the next meeting of the warrant committee is scheduled for November, as far as I understand. Is that your sense, Bob? I mean, I don't know that there's any activity in the month of September planned yet. Yeah, I don't think so. something in that time frame. And then the next one was just these two other questions that I'm, as a part of the conversation, if I'm having an open conversation with the town, I'm like, these are two things that I feel strongly about, and I think need to be talked about. And so maybe they will be a kind of a more ancillary part of the conversations that I'll be able to prompt in the weeks ahead. I took a bike ride. I've been doing a lot of bike riding around Medfield and walking over the course of the summer. And, I just happened to, for the first time I went on the rail trail, which was great. I really enjoyed that. Need to drop an email to Christian, and then occasionally we'll go by the grist mill. You see that as an asset to the town. Obviously, everything that's happening at the state hospital and Gene, and I mean, the evidence is all over town, the Vine Lake Cemetery and all of the, and that is, to me, has always been the distinctive character, part of the character of Medfield. Is I think that all of the, not all of, a lot of the good things that really happen in town, the food pantry and it's just, it's happening all over the place. Obviously, all this, the sports coaches and the people involved in scouts, and it's, it all adds up to just a kind of an enormous bundle of time and commitment, but energy and the passing on of, the benefit of the character of the town. So, that part of it I think is great, but it still needs to be talked about. And there are opportunities within town governance that are posted on our website all the time. The selectmen are always looking to appoint people to a committee, and so to be able to get that talked about. And the town meeting of the future is, I think I used to, call it the purest form of democracy. And I think in some ways, and there's been a lot written now about how local government and what we do in our local towns may be the bulwark of democracy, depending on how we go forward. But it needs to be relevant and look at ways that that it can be modernized and that the communication about it can be better. I'm open to that. I don't take any proprietary ownership of an institution that's been around in Medfield for 360 years almost. But I do think, and I'm a fan of it. I do think we conduct an awful lot of business in a single evening, and it does provide that opportunity for people within the town to participate. But we have had a couple of examples of where it might not be a perfect process. It's hard to manage 2,200 people in an open town meeting, or even a somewhat smaller number than that. Obviously, getting a quorum. We have a quorum of 250 people, so that's a high threshold of a quorum, but I don't think it's too high relative to 9,200 voters that we have in town. But we had a little bit of a speed bump in the spring when we came off of vacations and came back to a town meeting. Didn't get a quorum first time in anybody's memory that had happened. So the last thing is just simply the notion of keeping these going if there's interest, and using them as maybe a spark of some conversation and a way to be able to gather some thoughts, and for me to be able to get different perspectives. And I'm hoping for me to get to meet more people that I already know, and a lot of different people than I know. No, I know. I mean, I have an audience of 3 people I know pretty well.
It didn't work tonight,
But there's a lot of people in town, and I don't want to make it's not a generational question, but there is a need for me to connect, at least, and maybe for town government more generally to connect, with a whole another generation of people who have moved to Medfield, who are raising kids, who are building families, who are participating in all these town activities, and for the moderator to make connections. I always tell the story about when my kids were younger and they were doing that 3-on-3 soccer tournament, and I went over by Wheelock and I looked around. There must be 400 people there, and I said, I must know everybody in town. Every face was pretty much familiar. And then when the kids kind of cycled through the schools, I was out running one day, and there was the 3-on-3 soccer tournament, and I went there and I stood at the distance and looked over. I didn't know anybody. It just changed. You get connected so much to kids, even kids within your own grades. There are people in town that I don't know as well as I would have liked to, whose kids just were in between my kids. But I do feel very strongly that the best part about being moderator is the people of Medfield. And the best part about having lived here over all these years is the people in town. I mean, it's such a, and so I need to reach out, or people need to reach out to me and start to develop this dialogue that will help me to bring the, the right people to these appointments, and hopefully help to encourage other people to, to come to town government, or if not to town government, also to other opportunities to be able to, contribute to the things that build the town. So my email address is medfieldtownmoderator@medfield.net, and send me an email if you just want to begin a conversation. I respond to all of them, except when I get 300 in an evening, which has happened. And but I want to try to be as connected to people as possible. So that's my presentation portion. And beyond that, do we have anybody online?
No.
No.
I thought there was one Q&A.
Was there one?
Oh, let's see, let's pull it up.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's see, we have 5 people attending.
Oh, nice. Hello out there.
Let's see.
Anybody wants to be, they could be elevated. If
Said
they-
our slides were not advancing on Zoom, but they were advancing for us here on Zoom. So
I don't know.
yeah,
Do we need, well,
we'll publish the slideshow.
yeah, we'll publish a slideshow. And
But it was advancing for us here on Zoom. So
yeah. Interesting. Anybody who is out there, who is tuned in, want to make any comments, ask any questions, give me any suggestions? Open to that. And always open to that. And if there isn't, what about here? Bob, thoughts?
Oh, geez, how much? We'll get 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I came in support of this process getting going again. I think it's been a while.
Yeah.
That it's been sitting there. And I was encouraged to see in the some of the latest correspondence about it that there are actually some new ideas about how to do this. And in my 21 years in town now, we've taken a certain approach to doing things. Tear it down and redo it, tear it down and redo it. And I think there is a opportunity here to tackle multiple things that we need in the town, and not necessarily just expansion or improving of the of the school system if we're creative about it.
Yeah.
So back in and it was the last bullet point. Not to I'll toot my own horn a little bit, but after the public safety building was built, I did a rather lengthy post on the next thing, the next shoe to drop would be the schools. It was the next thing on the docket to get redone. And I was a big fan of hoping to leverage Wheelock and Memorial because they are smaller schools.
Yep.
If you look at them on an individual basis. And I think Dale, in terms of a refurbished type of thing, would have a lot of life left in it. And I think without having to do the stuff to it necessarily that we would have to do for a school, which has a different set of requirements, I was really hoping we could leverage, as the discussion started the last time, I was really hoping when they were talking about more grades together, less transitions, all of that. And I was going, an extra grade in each of the schools, maybe a little less administrative overhead.
Yep.
That would in turn help pay for the, the projects in each of the schools, like that kind of thinking, that kind of like, well, we have this, so we'll just tear it down and put up something new, or, that kind of thing. And, I just think that, and like I said, I forget what, it was up at the public safety building, the selectmen and some of the school board was just kind of taking a Q&A. This was a couple months ago.
Was, yeah.
I really hope that there's more checkpoints along the way. So I think we got to a point in the process where there was no turning back. Like, it was just like, here's what we're doing, and, you know, and I think when we got to the town meeting vote, and that didn't get the 2/3, and then it was like, but we're still gonna do the other vote, and people were kind of confused about that, and then that didn't gain even the 50%. You know, that was kind of needed, if that was a legitimate, because of the 2/3.
Yeah.
I think there were just some parts along the way where we could have paused and looked and said, do we truly have the support going forward? Or do we need to reconsider?
Well, I know that I think people have done a lot of reflecting,
Yeah.
some introspection. Maybe it hasn't been done as, you know, as publicly, and I'm not sure it's as necessary, to be honest with you, but your going forward point
Yeah.
is the opportunity that this provides us to be able to take maybe a different view, and move our perspective a little bit, look at things a little bit differently, bring some.
Yeah, the only thing that has lather, rinse, repeat on it is a shampoo bottle.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't be going back through the same process again. You know, I think it's the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
You know, but there are great things that came out of the process. There were good ideas, there was a direction, there was all of that kind of stuff. And I think when, you know, I think if we can take the stuff and see what people really supported about it, and then see what people didn't support, and give equal weight to both, I think you end up with a process in the end that can, you know, that can just kind of glance its way through the 2/3 town meeting and the vote after, and everyone can feel better or good about. Not that everyone's gonna feel great about it, but in something like this.
You're a little more optimistic about its ability to be able to move through that process, even if we get it right. But that's not my own view. I think that's, you know, it's still a difficult.
I'm not saying it's not difficult, but getting it right, I think, means that, you know, some of the stuff that is important to people, which I think we learned the last time, you know, it needs to be, you know, I hope whatever the composition of the school building committee is next time, they sit down and they come up with a list, and they come up with a list of like, hey, here's the important things. You know, here's the stuff that derailed it. Here's the stuff that everyone seemed, like you said, everyone's behind better education, you know, improving the educational system in town. What's the list of things that was, you know, what's the list of things that derailed, you know, the process, and really putting equal weight to both of those and not dismissing any of them. Because I think when you start dismissing, then you run into problems, you know, down the line. I think too, I'd like to see earlier releases of things before decisions are made, you know, instead of the day before or 2 days before, or, you know, like, hey, here's all the plans. And then like 2 days, literally a day and a half later, there was a vote on it. And it was like, you know, I don't know how to do that, because, I mean, if you look at the attendance, you know, here, it's hard to get people to come out unless there's a 10%, 12% tax increase on the table. That gets people's attention, you know? And it's funny because, like, I had a coworker who works in Westwood, so they were going through the same thing. And he came to me, he goes, I heard you guys are doing the school too. And he goes, well, our taxes are going up $400 a month. And I looked at him, I said, I think he moved out from the city. He was gonna getting new to the whole town thing.
Yeah.
I said, no. I said, you know, that's not why. So I kind of looked into what, you know, the other next town was doing. And it was like $432 a year for an average house. You know, I just, to me, that.
Yeah, but that is another whole, I'm a Westwood native, and you know Westwood well. I mean, there's another dynamic going on in that town that we don't have the benefit of.
I understand that, but I also think that we were almost attempting to do the same thing. Like, we weren't saying we are, see, that's the inherent, you just made the point, we inherently are a different town. And we may not.
It's gonna hit our residential taxpayers harder on a percentage basis. I mean, Westwood was able to kind of rejigger all their tax rates when they built it.
But to your point, what you're saying is, you're saying, oh, that will hit us harder, but is the same thing that we should be doing that Westwood's doing? Because they have $300 million tax base, or $118 million tax base, and where it was 60 something. Like, so I'm just wondering if and I'm hoping that creative, like we come up with some more possibly creative ways to say, you know, we can do a great job. And I mean, the teachers and involved parents and all of that kind of stuff, although we need good facilities, in my mind, is paramount. I think if you have great teachers and good involved parents, somehow we made it out of log cabins and, you know,
Yeah.
caves at one point, you know, to where we are today. And I'm not for places that are falling down or, you know, in need of a lot of repair and all that. I mean, that's not what I'm for, and that's not a good look for the town. But also, I wonder if we try to do something different than the towns that have those immense tax bases, and where if you know, one of the things that's always said at town meeting every year, that you know, when I made it, and I've been to a lot of them, you know, we want to keep the seniors, we want to be a diverse town, we want to be this, we want to be that, and then we go with, you know, a 12% tax or whatever it would have ended up being, and we go, well, we still are wanting all these things, and it's, to me, that's a mismatch, right? And so I'm wondering, and I'm hoping that this time we kind of say, you know, here's the sandbox we live in, you know, this town with this tax base, with this, you know, the things that we're thinking are going to happen.
Yeah.
And trying to play with maybe a little more inside our confines, than just saying, we can just do what we want. We can just, you know, we have not a blank check, but a bigger check than we think we have. And again, I don't know if that's the right answer or the wrong, but like, I think that's important.
It's important to be asking the questions.
Yeah, and I don't know what the right answer is, but can we get more creative than what we did initially? I don't know.
We'll see this time
Yeah.
around, right? I mean, it's, but the premise that, you know, around, I mean, because of the connection between spending on education strikes me, and your willingness, your support of having really good schools also affects other economics besides the taxes that are being paid in that particular year, right? So it has to do with property values and other factors that have some come into play.
Yeah, we can also, I mean, I can also push back and say, you know, property values also have to do with our location. I mean, we're 15 miles outside of Boston. We're one of the first tiers of community that is actually still decently rural.
Yeah.
You know, we have the education's a draw. My parents lived in Plymouth, and they said, you know, oh wow, your family lives in Medfield, great schools, and that's all well and good.
Yeah.
You know, I just think that there's a whole slew of things that lead to Medfield's a rare town having a town center like we do. Think about the other towns in the area. I wouldn't call one of mine in Westwood really a town center that you can kind of feel walking through and get that small town feel. A lot of towns, Millis doesn't have that. Sherburne has one or two things in the set, you know.
Yep.
So we have other things. Now, I believe, you know, having that good educational system definitely helps with property value, but it's not the be all and end all of why our property values are, you know, the way they are.
It's also, though, I was trying to get to the heritage, there's also a little, I think there's a, you know, a tradition around it being, you know, kind of a vitally important part of that fabric of the community that I was talking about.
Yeah.
You know, distinctively good education is a part of that, I think, in Medfield.
Yeah, and again, I think having a good facility is important. I think not necessarily having the super amazing, you know, take you know, I've seen this. I've seen, you know, I work at BC, so I see that I teach at BC, so I see this kind of stuff where things are brought in because they're the best and the this and the that, and they may not get used. Like they're there and it can be touted as an opportunity and things of that nature, but it's not necessarily, or it's used by a very small percentage or you know, whatever. Again, I really, and I'm biased because I'm a teacher, I really think that having involved parents and having great teachers are paramount to necessarily having certain like, a big glass wall of windows, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, whatever the nicety is. We have turned out great students from our schools for years. Despite what people might say are subpar schools, in terms of physical buildings. My kids not too long ago went through, Dale, and there were shortcomings at Dale.
Yeah.
They went
You know, what I
through-
don't really want to do, I appreciate all this, but I don't want to, this is the conversation that when the school building committee is appointed, that
Okay.
you need to have with them.
Yeah.
In other words, I think that's because then about their direction and what they're gonna do, and they're gonna have to hear from the community, I think, as well, when they're appointed.
So I'll focus, and I think what I said in the meeting a couple months ago is that the fundamental thing is to have checkpoints along the process, and also figure, and I don't know what it is, but figure out a way so that at these points that it's not 20 or 30 people in a room.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know what it is. I mean, this is a multi-year process. So is it really, are these questions that come up at town meeting that say, here's our preliminary, when we have 200, 300, 400 people in a room. And again, I don't know, but I think we just in general need to do a better job of the early parts.
The broad principle of that, I could think can make some sense for sure, that there's got to be periods of time. So, I think that's.
I don't know what the answer is, but like, I haven't seen a turnout of that day of voting, and I mean, you've been here longer than I have. I mean, have you seen
the numbers that turned out? I don't know what we got. We got 1,900 or something in 2003 or whatever the year was.
We had the same kind of turnout.
Turnout
in
was immense.
school as
When that whole process unfolded, so, but not like, not with that, and it was. I'm trying to remember, it was pretty contentious.
There was definitely, there was a town side and money, which there always is.
Yeah.
It wasn't as contentious about the building and where, as much as the money and the size. And we made the 2/3 at town meeting. We lost on paper only by 8 votes.
Yeah.
But we went back and redid it. We did not try to put the same project forward. We went back, and even though it was 8 votes, people were like, you could get 8 more people. And I remember I was in Memorial because we used to vote, looking at the parking lot, there were 3 votes walking in when they locked the door because they missed the time. So, but we sat and said, okay, what are people saying? What are the concerns? And we redid the project. And in hindsight, I actually liked the second round better. The project we ended up with, I think, was better than the original. So,
what percentage? Like, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot from the original project that was.
we flipped the middle and high school. But we were going to make a new building on the Willock property, and there were many reasons no against it. There are more reasons now to turn with water and land than then, but because the building wasn't as big. And instead we rehabbed Memorial. And one of the reasons we were going for the new building was the Park and Rec was always looking for a spot. And the old Memorial, not now, but the old Memorial was a very small 1-floor building with a gym, a cap, and some rooms. Actually would have made a good Park and Rec.
Yeah.
And the thought had been, use that, but we did lose the vote, and we went back, and instead we rehabbed Memorial, which I actually think turned out great, with the new wing on, rehabbed all the rooms. It was in really tough shape. And still flipped the middle school and the high school, and did reduce that project financially. But the fight was really about money. There was a lot of other pieces mixed in with this last project. It was about what Dale, and talked about the heritage of the town. Well, to people who've been in town a long time, Dale was like an icon. It's an icon in the downtown, and that was upsetting to a lot of people, letting that go. So there was that whole piece in the middle of it. Another big piece, which I don't think has really been vetted as you talk about the checkpoints, is the idea of this campus going from 3 buildings to 2. The average school building in Massachusetts is 400 kids. We now have 3 buildings with 400. To go to 2 buildings, that's 600 each. And that's not considered a good educational model for elementary. And you know how it happens if you give up a building and you end up with 2, you're never going to get that building back. And then if the population goes up, you could be at 650 each or 700, you know, so.
You also have to consider things like school populations are dropping across the country.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, you
There's-
just don't know. You just don't know where it's going, but once you give the building up, you're gone with the building, and 600 is a really big elementary school. A really big elementary school. And so there was a piece in this project that went beyond we're trying to rehab a building, get a new school. They actually are talking about changing the structure in Medfield. In the 90s, when Chris Marcus was superintendent, he wanted K through 5s. And we did surveys with the town, and overwhelmingly the people didn't want it. It was like 90-something%, which I have to say stunned me, but they didn't want it.
Which is kind of funny because the conversation, or one of the conversations around this time was too many transitions.
Right,
You know, and too
well,
much stress for the kids and.
yeah, but I don't
changing
know if
schools
that's
and-
coming really from the people and the kids. Because we did the surveys with the people, and a lot of the people said, and I was surprised by the results, because I thought, who wants to go to 3 curriculum nights, right? Let's make K to 5s go to 1, right? You have all your kids get home at the same time. But people were like, no, when they used to have K through 5s in town, and they were always really competitive. There was the rich school, or the school that had a good PE, or the school had this or that, and people felt it was very contentious. And one of the things that came out in the survey was this whole transition made it very fair. Every kid went through every building, and you got the best of each building. You know, so they felt it was very equitable. And we did surveys of the kids who went through. And the kids had very positive things to say about the transition. They liked going to a new school, they felt more grown up when they moved. And so I think this project got beyond a new school, which everyone I talk to agrees Dale Street needs, you know, something, right? And when we knew that 20 or 30 years ago. But this project went into other areas and went to sort of redesigning Medfield's elementary school system. And then it also talked about an icon and letting it go. And I'm not sure the legwork was done to find out if the community actually wanted to go in these directions of letting an icon go. And this idea of the 2 buildings. Maybe they do, but there were just a lot of questions brought up and a lot of things people were asking when they're supposed to be voting, and late to be asking that now, right? You asked that at the beginning, not when we're voting, right?
Well, I think too, there were surveys done very early on, or earlier, not early in 2000, whatever, when supposedly this has been in the planning for 10 years.
Well,
2008 or 2009 or something like that.
there was a start, and then the recession hit. But at that time, the plans that were drawn up were for Dale and a rehab.
Mhm.
So that all went, and then we had a change of superintendents. And so then it kind of started again, you know, and every superintendent brings their own flavor to stuff.
So I mean, back in 5 or 6 years, maybe there was a very early on survey, I believe, that was taken. And again, I don't remember, I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but I think it was leaning towards doing something in the center of town. I mean, I don't remember exactly the numbers, but again, I think we need to take that kind of stuff seriously from the get-go.
Right.
If you look at what it takes in Medfield, the voting body, so I looked up some, because I enjoy this kind of stuff, some statistics on what they consider a substantial sample size. And it's not much. Like that survey actually, for the number of people that responded to it, was a significant survey. It said this is probably going to happen later on in the process. And I just think, again, this is going back to my checkpoints thing, that I think these things, no matter if they're going to be, the time is going to be taken to put them together and put them out there and get responses. I think we need to take them seriously. I mean, because that's what we want, right? Is we want people to respond and then be taken seriously with their responses,
Right.
and not just say, well, this is too early on in the process, or this is too whatever, or what. I think they just need to be taken seriously.
Well, and Scott's point is very important, is you can't just survey the parents with kids in town. You need to survey the town, because
Yeah.
we're all here, we're all a part of it, we all have a piece in it.
Yeah.
And so there's that whole piece.
Yeah.
You gotta get new people, you gotta get people who live here a long time, and then you obviously have the parents with the kids is easiest to survey because you got the kids right there. I was gonna say, you could actually put your letter in the packets, the school packets.
No,
Um,
to get more, yeah, we looked to other groups as well to get it
Yeah, to
circulated
get
more broadly.
circulated,
Yeah.
but, so yeah, I totally agree with you, is that you've got to figure out what are the big questions. You have to put those out early, you have to, and it is a pain to get all the feedback, but you gotta get the feedback. And then you have to honor it, you have to
Yeah.
look at what it says, and you have to, maybe make some changes, or maybe the feedback's all with you and it's like gung ho, then you got it.
I think one of the Scott's points up there is that sometimes you even if you have a belief that it's one way or whatever going in, and you get the feedback that says that's not going to be supported,
Right,
you need to, you just need to go, okay. You just need to go, that's what I believed, but, because like we're in the democracy.
Yeah,
That's
we're
not the way
we're
we
a
can
deliberative,
yeah,
these committees that of volunteers, they have,
it's tough to balance, because again, when you're on a committee, you want to get to that goal, you want to get to that end point. And
right,
it's hard to get early feedback when, again, there's not money and numbers on the table.
right,
So, how do you, I think early on, the whatever committee gets put together, I think that's gonna be a major challenge. Is to figure out, like, I think it's almost paramount to say, how do we make sure that we're at least maybe getting that statistically significant overview of what people believe, so that, when we end up at the 2/3 meeting and the ballot vote after, we have a generally good idea, because I don't think a lot of people even believe that, even at the ballot vote, that it would be 50-50. Like, I think a lot of people were just generally surprised, not only by the turnout,
Yeah.
but by the outcome of it. And so I just think we can somehow not get rid of the risk, but mitigate the risk.
right. Well, like, I was hoping that a committee would have been formed in the spring, just because like Medfield Day is coming, and Medfield Day is a lot of people like trickling around. It's a good time to ask questions like, what do you think about this location, or moving this, or 2 buildings versus 3, or K-5, you're looking for those opportunities where you can tap lots of people and get feedback, because you're right, there's a lot of questions. And it's hard, and to me, when you get the votes though, that is information.
Yeah.
I thought there was a clear information in the paper vote, how much it lost by. And that would have said to me, if I was on the school committee, oh, we need to look at this again. We can't just bring the same thing forward, because we only lost by 8 votes, and we made significant changes. They lost by a lot.
I think even if you pass by 1 vote, let's say you were 1 vote above or 1 vote below, I think the goal is to make that winning margin as big as possible, because
Yeah.
that's telling you that you're on
That
the
you
pulse
have
of
most people,
what the town
exactly.
is wanting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be the biggest expenditure that the town has ever made, it'll be the biggest commitment when we hopefully do this.
Yeah,
So recognizing that, you want to go through all those steps, and you'd like to do it with, more than just squeaking by the,
Right.
required,
I feel like
the required
really be-
majority, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Bob, thoughts? I know you're listening, and yeah. I mean, I think this is healthy, I think, and, hopefully all I could think of when you said Medfield Day is I'm gonna be back in the dunking booth.
Yeah.
I think, it's like,
No,
oh, no.
Stop dunking booths in the
but-
pandemic.
Okay,
But the thing is that, I think from all that comes together here, it still comes back to, or from my perspective, the two themes that you had on that slide, engagement and town meeting. I mean, I think the fundamental question is, how do you generate engagement?
Yes.
Because I think that, so long as it's a small group or small groups opposing each other.
Yeah.
You're not getting representation, and then, and we talked earlier
Yeah.
about communication. How do you get involvement, engagement? That doesn't mean how do you get everybody to be on a committee, but participation. The fundamental of the town meeting concept is that it's the legislative body. I would be very surprised if you surveyed the 9,284 voters in town and said, did you know that you're a congressperson?
Yes.
I don't think, that's a concept that we who participate, actively understand. But somehow I think, that education needs to be enforced.
yes,
When we didn't get the quorum, I asked the people who didn't come, and they said, well, there wasn't really anything on there that, I really cared about voting for. I said, you have to understand, this is how the town budgets get approved.
yeah, it's the
This
budget.
is how your firemen, teachers, policemen, everyone gets paid, how town hall runs. We all have to vote the budgets. I'm like, you do? I'm like, yeah, this is how we do it down. But
That new car,
Yeah.
that new police car versus that old broken down police car.
Right.
That was your vote. or
That was-
something.
That's how we run it, we vote.
I think there's a lot of people too who move in from out of town, or they move in from areas that just don't
Don't
have
have
this
this,
version of
right.
things. And they expect, the mayor and the city council to take care of things, or,
Yes,
or some other way of doing government. And I mean, I think the town meeting is great. I've watched British Parliament from time to time. That's an amazing experience if anybody.
When they bring the MP up to be,
Just the debates.
The open debates,
Just the
yes.
debates. I mean, it's pretty amazing, but, I would hate to see that change. I think it is a really important part of what we do in the town. But I would like to see, again, not just the engagement at the end. I'd like to figure out a way to, when I go and was like, people are like, why are they drilling down here? Why? And it's like 80% of the people were like, why are they drilling? And it's like, there's an X $million proposal on the table to do what? And you just kind of shake and you go, how do we make that better? Like, how do we get people involved? And I think, again, if you do that, and I don't know if it's getting someone who's better at, like, a marketer, like somebody who does this on as a career type.
you mean to promote the word and to get, to
Yeah,
promote
yeah.
civic engagement generally, which is,
there were two thoughts that I've heard that. One is, and I know you've heard it, is to do it on a Saturday,
Yeah.
not a night, because it's just easier for a lot of people on the weekend.
Yep.
That was one. The second one is, now that we're all into the Zoom thing, is to maybe put out a couple Zooms before town meeting that said, here's some things coming up at town meeting. And
Yeah.
not long, but just so that people don't come hearing about something for the very
Mhm.
first time at town meeting. Hard to make a decision when you're just hearing about it that night. I don't know if people will really go or attend, because there's certainly paper information
Yep.
out there, but
we have talked to Medfield TV as recently as yesterday, in fact, about, because when our new director was in Bedford, that was part of her job producing. And they used to do on all of the issues on the articles, it was a short little
Okay.
video.
Yeah.
That had a couple of people, and people could kind of go and go on, because certainly town meeting works better when people come and they're more informed, and there's not enough time, particularly when we have a full warrant of
Yeah.
do the
that's what I'm trying to go
education
through
and,
it, right.
and all of that.
I think that's why towns go to the representative instead of having everybody come, because the job of those representatives in the precincts is to be educated, right?
Yeah.
And go to meetings before the town
One would
meeting.
hope, but yeah.
Towards the end of the process, people would go to different meetings around town. So they wouldn't hold a meeting, but they would find where people got together and go to them.
Yeah.
You know, they would go to something at the senior center, they would go to something at the library, like,
Yeah.
they would inject themselves into. And that was something I think was more later in the process than earlier. I think that might be an effective way to kind of do the pyramid scheme.
Yeah, to
of
get people in,
information.
yeah.
I think it's effective to actually be out. Instead of saying, here's a meeting on a Tuesday night. You know, the people are already going to a meeting because they are engaged in that topic.
Yeah,
for
in that
whatever reason.
activity, right, okay.
And it's like, can we borrow 15 minutes to give an update or, you know, where we are in the process and just, you know, this is important town stuff. And you don't have to put any extra time out of your day or you know, I had 3 reminders that this was happening tonight just to make sure I was here. You know, and you know, it's never going to be a great time for everybody. Someone
No.
always has soccer, or is going to be on
Did
vacation,
something,
or it's
right.
going to be this or that. And that's a lot of what I heard in the last go around. You know, it can't be on a Saturday afternoon. That's like the outdoor town meeting.
Oh, I know.
It can't be on a Saturday afternoon because there's soccer practice or there's this or that.
Yeah,
But you know, I teach one night a week. So on occasion, town meeting is landed on a night that I teach.
right.
So, and I go, oh, but that's, you know, that's,
Yeah.
I accept that because that's just the way things happen.
Just a lot to do in the evening, and for a lot of years, there was always 2 nights. It went over into the other, the second night, but I don't know, you'd have to wait, you know, see if you really got more people, say if you did, you know, 10 o'clock on a Saturday till 12:01, I don't know. There's always things that are coming up, but.
Well, yeah, then, but there's always priorities. I think
Yeah.
the thing to think about a little is, one, you're talking about a survey. You know, find out what people do or don't know.
Yeah.
And why are they do or don't participate. I mean, you know, it's common in America, you know. What is it, 45-50% of the people don't vote, so, you know, but when you're looking at an opportunity. You know, I think a little bit of the history of the town meeting does maybe give you some insight. Because I'm sure back in, you know, you read Richard's book and it's like, you know, 150 years ago, it was a big event, you know, people put their straw hats on and come and meet downtown and you know, and have their meeting. And so maybe you make it an event, you know, maybe you have it around.
I like that,
a Medfield
yeah.
day. You know, and everybody gets together and, you know, and you get, and, you know, by the way, we're gonna vote on your budget, you know, but make it a community event.
Yeah.
Right now, it's somebody else's responsibility and, you know, I'm not agree, you can't be Pollyanna about it. I don't expect it's gonna be. But I think I do think there are some legitimate reasons for people who are interested.
Yeah.
And don't participate because they don't know how.
Yeah.
And of course, and time constraints will always be a factor, so make it easier for them, you know, and maybe, you know, if you don't have it on, you can't make it at 4 o'clock, you know, on a Saturday, because that's soccer day, then you just talk to the Medfield soccer team and say, we can't have soccer on this day once a year.
On that day,
you know?
yeah. And we do get religious pushback as well on Saturdays, particularly. And so, you know, you try to find out what the right thing to do there is. Members of our community feel that we're not respecting diversity if we do, you know, do it at a certain time on Saturday. And I think, and so has got to be held into account. We've talked about that.
Sure.
So we've looked for the right time. We moved to 5 o'clock on a Monday, I think, when we were outside one of the times, and then we did the big one was on a Sunday afternoon. So I agree with all of this, by the way. This is what I want to hear. I'd be interested in any ideas, you know, around the community event. There's another factor that's kind of interesting because, you know, it's the old saying about, you know, preaching to the converted, but there's a group of people in town that for whatever reason, that this engagement around this really makes a difference to, you know, they in fact appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate. But I've had friends over the years who know that I have done this, who, you know, it's almost like they would entrust it to the folks that know more, or so, you know, or who have paid more attention or something. They don't, it's not like it's spiteful. It's not like they're stiff arming or they're neglecting, or it's just
Yeah.
seems to be relatively under control until you get to a, you know,
Until
a
it's
big
not.
vote, until it's
Yeah,
not, right? You
yeah.
gotta do a
Until you
massive
get a
vote.
big item and
It's all
suddenly,
in control until it's not.
Yeah, and so,
But I think it's important from my point of view to encourage an understanding of participation. I mean, I know why people, you know, when they come home from work and they can't get out at 7 o'clock and the kids are this and that. I get that. And so in Saturday, I'm not prejudiced on a given day, but I think it's, you know, the one experiences that I've had in my time on the Warren Committee is the amount of time and dedication that people on these committees spend.
yeah,
And the time and dedication that the management of these different departments, and I've gone through the cycle, I think, of each department. And I think that there's a responsibility on all of our parts, whether we're on committees or taxpayers, to have a better appreciation of the time and the talent that's devoted to this. And, you know, which comes out of, oh, you're not listening and this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, it gets into a defensive piece that really isn't helpful in any respect. But, you know, when someone spends 4 years on a committee and spends weeks and weeks of open meetings, and then they said, boy, where did this come from? You know, I'm not gonna argue one way or the other. I'm just saying, we have a responsibility, if we're gonna take some leadership positions, to get that to surface, so that people understand that. And they do, you know, they kind of damn me with faint praise of, you know, well, of course, we appreciate it. We're not talking bad about you, but we sure don't like what you did.
it was nice to see the hospital vote. You think all the years in that hospital that it was such a yay vote. You know, talking about that, think of all the years people have been working on the hospital property.
Yeah, you know, and it wasn't always that easy, but I think that you and I talked, and I think I thought the way that was a model of communication. An organization, you know, knows how to communicate.
Yes.
And, you know, and we're all amateurs, you know, but they're pros. And you can see the value of effective communication style.
yes,
Because we put information out,
Yes,
right? I mean, there was no shortage of information on the schools or the programs or what have you, but the method and the way it was, and you know, to the point of people listening.
yeah.
You know, they were excellent listeners.
I like your idea, you know, about kind of community reps. You know, to engage people in different parts of the town who live in different areas. I mean, there were definitely, I think that might be a very effective way, because those people see each other. They go out, they walk their dog, they see you on occasion. You know, I mean, it's just maybe not an official position, but it's not a committee position, but it's from the committee there. I mean, we have precincts in town, you know, you go to the table that you vote on, and saying that, you know, here is your precinct represent. They're not a voting body. They're not engaged to give opinion, but they're engaged to be like, you know, here's where we are in the process. Here's what's coming down the pike. Here's what this, you know, what this means, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. And the message would be agreed upon by X committee, and then disseminate, kind of the phone tree when school closed, you called two people, they had to call two,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure enough people actually open up Hometown Weekly,
Yeah, I'm
and
not
read
sure
through
about
it.
that. Yeah.
I don't know that, in all the noise online on a Facebook or on a this or on a that, you can be part of a group, you can be part of the Dale Street, building committee group or whatever, school building committee, and it just gets, if you don't visit it a lot, it comes off your feed and then it's tucked in behind, so there's
Yeah.
so many things that go wrong, but if you, I think, have that kind of human chain type of thing, I think that might be an effective way to
It's interesting.
and make it formal. Like I said, we already have precincts, we already have this town divided up into different areas. It was, when I started learning about this a couple of years ago, I went to a lot of the people in our neighborhood to talk to them about it. Because I felt like a lot of people didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah.
I think that might be an effective, instead of trying to get everyone at a meeting or everybody, because that's difficult.
Right.
The interesting thing I think that's been good though is that with the Zoom meeting formats, the recordings have been great. I mean, when you talk about getting everybody, because you have to be synchronous. In the old days, if you wanted to, go to a meeting, you had to be here at that time when it was being conducted.
Yeah.
And I find it very useful to be able to go back and
Yeah.
I saw the school committee meeting both on the 22nd and the 18th, just because I could do it a little bit later. So that's an advantage in terms of being able to get communicated those things to people, is to have that, maybe to cut them down into smaller snippets of things and get them packaged in a way they can get out to.
Like even the meeting tonight, I saw that you put up the letter, so I was like, oh, I went to the patch and I read the letter. And I read down and then there was a huge ad, which made it look like the end of the letter.
In the middle.
So of course I
I got
replied,
scrolled.
did anyone mention where it's going to be?
Yeah.
Because it was down in the last part of the letter. So even effective communication, sometimes gets, so even to your point, it's great that the meetings are recorded. But I know I've told people, hey, if you can't get there, do you know that it's up? It's up on Medfield TV,
On the website, the town's website,
Exactly, but it's to me, the best communication, even though we don't, digital communication is great, it can reach a huge audience, but it's a lot of noise to cut through. I still think the most effective communication is talking to people and having them talk to people. And when I talk to people, I always said, go talk to somebody else. It's always the last thing I said to them. Make sure they're at least in the know that something is happening.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people didn't even know.
I wonder if at Medfield Day we should have a booth every year that says, why go to town meeting? Just PR town meeting.
Yeah, PR town meeting.
And you could just,
It's interesting.
Scott and I are doing a town meeting 101 course.
oh, really?
The fall.
Yeah, late fall, early winter.
That's definitely in the off-season, but just for people that are interested, maybe bring back some people, might have some, let Richard have some say about the historical element, because to me, that part is powerful to me.
Well, I think the comment on, there's a couple of things. One, I think some way of communication, maybe it's at the Medfield Day, is to do that survey and to get some feedback. And how do people feel about, what do they know about it? And how do they feel about a representative town meeting? And I don't think that's one that's automatic. I think it would be difficult to have an informal, because it's already informal, but that question of, are we at a point, because of I always view, the representative town meeting as being a size issue.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think it is, because of the demographics of the town.
Yeah.
We got young people coming in with young kids and buying $1 million houses. So mom and dad work, and that puts a lot of different dynamics in place. It puts dynamics on the school, on the park and rec, on the MAP program. It's a different town, it's a different makeup. And when you think about that, or when I think about that, I say, well, maybe the representative town meeting is something that's, whose time has come.
Yep.
You know?
There is a population limit on both the top end and the bottom, that you cannot do representative town meetings, but I think the threshold is like 5,600 people, so you have to be a town of at least that size to be able to do it. And then, is there, what does it switch over around? Is there another size? Because the third form of government that you can have as a town is to have a town council, right? Instead of selectmen. I mean, you don't have to have a town meeting. You have a whole other form of government as well that towns are permitted to have. So you open town meeting, representative town meeting, and, you know, a town council kind of,
Well,
but as you move down that committee, you're
less
removing
people.
people.
Yeah, well,
that's
in each
the thing,
instance.
you know, but you know, the quorum of 250 is less than 3% of the population,
Yeah,
of the
it's low.
voting population. So, you know, from a practical point of view, the first question you want to ask people is, are you comfortable with an unknown group of 3% of the population making your decisions for
Yeah.
you? You know, I mean, it's a perspective. It's like, well, wait a minute, like you said, you know,
Yeah,
that's where all the budgets come from. That's why North Street is done and this street is not. You know, those are the things that are discussed
Yeah.
and reviewed.
But that could be, even if you're uncomfortable with 250 or 300, that could still be a statistically significant amount of people to represent.
Oh, I think as a legislative body, it is.
Yeah.
I think it is, and that the people
Yeah,
choose to
I'm not
be the
talking
representatives.
statistics. I'm talking about, are you comfortable with that number of people making all your decisions for you? That's fine.
But are you comfortable then with 10 people? Or, you know, if you go the representative route, are you comfortable with 10 people who might be there for a certain number of years, who will have you know, everyone has bias, it's just the kind of human nature. You know, that the town will go in a certain direction with the 10 people who are there, as opposed to people, the ebb and flow of people who show up to, more people with more significant issues. But you have that kind of ebb and flow of input. which
I'll
I-
get some more data, and we'll revisit that, because my general sense of having paid attention to representative town meetings is we in Medfield would have to be careful what we wish for. Because they go multiple nights, because if you're elected to represent people, the people who elect you expect you to represent them, therefore to speak. And, you know, I know that in 1 year, a very good friend of mine at BC was in the accounting faculty, Ron Palika. He, 21 days they went in Lexington, the town meeting,
Oh,
representative town meeting. And I know that in Needham, they go multiple nights as.
doesn't Dedham have representatives?
Yeah.
too?
I don't know what Dedham has. That's a good question. But there's 220 town meeting representatives in Needham. So it's not, you know, it's not like
Framingham just changed a couple of years ago, because they went from a whatever to a town or whatever to a.
Framingham
city,
went to a
and-
city, yeah.
Yeah, and so they changed their, you know.
Yeah.
way
Well,
of
they have a
doing
mayor
things
now,
completely.
yeah.
Have a mayor.
Mayor from,
But they used to have a town council when they were a town, right? But
no, they
no,
had a
was
board
it
of
the Board
selectmen
of
when they
Selectmen?
were a
Did
town.
they?
Yep. Now they have a council mayor form.
Yeah, interesting.
Be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, we'll see. Well, look, thank you for
Dedham
coming
is
out.
representative.
Thank you.
And
No, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just.
no, I think and I'm trying to just project that, you know, however it works best,
Right,
you know, and gets the most people engaged, and we make the best decisions as a town. Which, you know, I mean, overall, if you look at the economy of town meeting, I know there's a lot of downside elements, but we get a lot of business done in one night, thanks to the organization of, you know, the town administrator and the warrant committee. We come in prepared, and we do a lot of business in a short amount of time, relatively, but which is good, I think. And so if people can commit to that 3 or 4 hours, then they may see most of government at work on a legislative level, doing that kind of activity.
is the town meeting, like annual meeting date already like for
Yes.
next spring set?
First
Yeah,
Monday in
First
May,
Monday in May.
First month, so maybe that's another whole piece of.
yeah, get it out there.
Mark
just
it
say,
now,
mark it
first
now.
Monday in May.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we have to rethink the
Yeah.
PR of it,
Yeah.
right?
There we go. No, I think you're right. I mean, I think some of these ideas around that about, it hasn't really been promoted and, you know.
Sign in front of the town hall, mark your calendars
there's-
now,
yeah.
first Monday in May.
We have
I
some
think a lot
social
of-
media going on New Year's Day to remind people.
I think a lot of people do pick up the warrant book
Yeah.
when they get it and they
Yes.
flip through it and they say. "Eh?" Like, I think like they look, to your point, why, you know,
I don't know any of these things, I
Yeah.
don't know about the pipes
Or-
on this road
or
or
I see this
whatever,
every
so-
year and I've been to town meeting and 98% of the people go,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing that's happening this year, so why do I have to go to something and,
Right.
you know, do that? If
We gotta understand their significance in the town, like you said,
Yeah.
if they think of themselves as a legislator of the town, congressperson.
Decisions are
who knows?
made by those who show up.
Exactly, and so that should be their piece, but.
And I think, you know, when you talk about the last couple of years, through great effort, particularly to the town management, we presented and the school committee as well, the school department as well as we participated, we presented a balanced budget. That too generates, for lack of a better term, I guess some degree of, okay, there's no reason for me to go.
comfortableness,
Right,
like,
yeah,
hey,
okay.
everybody.
It's
You know,
balance
but
everything
that's
out,
never
and
gonna,
then
that's not,
okay.
you know, that's not sure.
We're
You've got-
victims of our own success.
Yeah, in that
They're taken
respect,
care of.
but you know, but the reality
No, I get
is,
that.
we're squeezing the balloon. And, you know, we speak very candidly in the warrant committee meeting, which are all public.
Yeah.
But, as you referenced earlier, we have and will continue to have a revenue issue in this town. And so the revenue issue leads to a spending issue.
Hmm.
And so there will continue to be the challenging discussions, you know, not just bells and whistles, but fundamental services that are going to be continued. So I think from a practical perspective, for a town that's going through change, right? I mean, the dynamics of the town are changing. It's becoming younger, it's becoming, you know, that's just the way the process goes.
I wonder about that one, because I remember going back to 2005 or 6, we had the highest percentage of people in the state under 18. We were the leading town that had this. We had the youngest population. Does that ring a bell to you?
I just remember we had a couple of huge years in the
Yeah.
schools, that one class that was every year we were struggling to fit them.
Richard had in that article that I read.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the highest number of kids under 18 per capita.
Per
in the
capita in the
Commonwealth.
Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe we are.
Well,
It'd be interesting to know, are more people staying, you know, or more people are, you know,
Well, the dynamics, and it seems to make, to your point,
Yeah.
you don't recognize people, their changes are all,
Yeah,
you know, evolving, but I guess my thought there is that it's probably more important to educate people on the process, because what's coming down the road, they're gonna wanna be in what.
there's gonna be more tough choices.
Whether it's and it's not just the school building, there are a lot of other dynamics, you know, I don't say just the school building,
Yeah.
that's the one, that's the elephant in the room, but there's a lot of things that are gonna change and be affected as we go forward, because as revenue, you know, keeps coming to the same source.
State starts cutting back and all that kind of fun stuff.
Well, you have to make
Yeah.
decisions. There are decisions that are there, and it's not, you know, the warrant committee doesn't make the decisions, it just presents the information.
Right.
But people should need to be aware and be engaged, because it's like questions will arise. So I think it's important what you're addressing right now.
So would kind of a representative communication strategy in this town potentially work better? Than, I mean, I think we've seen that kind of how we do things now is okay, but not great. I think, again, I'd like to really see some push towards, you know, how do we, you know, who's our rep in Town? You know, who's the, you know, to get all those new people who are completely new to the process, and, you know, who's our rep with the seniors, who's our rep with, you know, like, and again, in different communities around town. And really try to, you know, have a synthesis point just for facts, not opinions or, you know, this and that, and that gets pushed out to, you know, these people who then can speak at a meeting or speak, you know, get 10 minutes at something and.
Well, I think we're onto something. I think we're beginning, right, with what we need a communications, you know, we do need to, you know, have a plan. And there's various ways for me to be able to communicate this event, and there's certain sources that you know, you can reach out to, or approaches, you know, that have to do with people that have blogs or who have mailing lists, you know, that I rely on by sending things to those.
Yeah.
Things get posted on concerned citizens of Medfield. I try to still do a letter in the hometown weekly. I don't know how many people turn to that kind of a source, but you know, it's a factor. Thoughts on, I know it's talked about at the selectmen's level as well, right? About these things. On the other hand, I don't think we should be so hard on ourselves. You know, with all of this said, you know, in terms of the way that this town has operated and functioned, and even as levels of contention rose or whatever it was, discord, you know, I mean, the degree of civility is still, I mean, there's been stories and a lot of other, but we still have to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I think that's one of the things that was part of our distinctive, you know, makeup, is that people did largely talk to each other, and, you know, and there's a lot of pulling together in town that sometimes gets lost, I think, when we get an event that, you know, pulls us apart.
Just fundamentally need to remember that there's a whole slew of really good people, no matter what their opinions
Unbelievable.
are.
And what people are doing in town, and the devotions
Yep.
that they have to make things happen for the benefit of the town is really great, spectacular.
Your last item, keep a sense of humor.
No, keep the sense of humor. Thanks, everybody.